It's interesting. I do think of the families, if anybody has kids, if they've ever had to pack up to go on vacation, there is a lot of effort to do it. And if you're taking everything you need and all the food that you need, there was effort to getting there. It wasn't like this easy thing, but the invitation and the experience made all of the effort worthwhile. And what's true is recovery is work. Feasting is work. And yet the outcome, what we experience, the community, the connection, the transformation, the space of grace, not shame, it does take effort to get there. You got to load the minivan. And yet it is so worthwhile to be in that space.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and we're here again today with our usual host, Dr. Greg Miller. Greg, great to see you.
It's good to be here.
And Greg, guess what we've done? We've reached deep into the talent pool here at Faithful and True and got Josh Moon from our staff to join us today. How are you, Josh?
I'm well, thank you, Randy. That sounded a little like bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
no, it's not
all
bottom
the way
of any
from Chattanooga.
No, we flew him in from Tennessee, and he's here to help us out with this month's Men of Valor workshop. That not Men of Valor. Yeah. Our men's journey workshop that begins here tomorrow. So welcome, Josh. We're happy to have you. And we brought Josh in to talk about the principles of feasting.
And for those of you who maybe have met Josh or know Josh, he is our resident Old Testament scholar. So it makes perfect sense that we would be having this conversation. And one of the things that's true is feasting is one of the big images that we find in the scripture, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And they had a spiritual component to them. They had a cultural, they had a communal. And so it really was a significant thing. And one thing to understand is it was God's invitation to the feast. And we see that throughout the scripture. So we're going to be talking about kind of the spirituality of feasting and what exactly is it that God is inviting us to.
Yeah, it's one of the great opportunities where kind of being saturated in Old Testament studies for a long time, sometimes you come back up and you realize there's a lot of really, really, really good stuff, important things that we just read right over in the Christian church. And so this is one of the areas that I feel very passionate about.
Right.
I like feasting,
right.
Turns out.
What's also true is, I think one of the reasons that it can be challenging for us is we don't really have a cultural correlation today. So we take what we understand, and so we hear feasting, and we think about a big meal, maybe a lot of people, maybe a gathering of community, and all of those are aspects of it, and yet there's so much more beyond that.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, a lot of sociologists will talk about the loss of feasting in Western culture, that there's a big gap, that we used to have a lot of feasting, and now we have a lot of food and a lot of gluttony. But gluttony is not feasting.
Right.
Those two are actually opposed to one another.
Right. So what are some of the aspects or the components that are represented in feasting?
Yeah, so, we have to remember feasting structured the life of the people who belong to God, to the Lord our God. It structured their life. So there were 6 main feasts, but 3 especially important feasts where everyone was supposed to go down to Jerusalem. And you have this entire city, and by command of God, everybody's supposed to throw this enormous party. You're to eat meat, which wasn't very common. Outside of fish, just meat wasn't very common. You have to eat meat, you have to drink wine or strong drink or anything your heart desires by command of God, and rejoice. And 3 times a year, every year. And it structured your life. It structured the life. And so it involved these aspects of, I'm actually called by God to join together and to provide, put down all my work. I have to leave that and make this long journey. For some people, it was a long journey. It would take a while to get there. You have to walk. And you go and you bring your things and you're there, and the whole city is filled with people. I mean, just crammed full of people eating lots of good food and drinking lots of good wine. And that's at bottom, that's what you grow up realizing. This is what it means to belong to this God, this kind of life, these feasts.
Right. Well, in some ways, it's like the divine potluck, where part of it is, you alluded to this, is I bring myself and I bring my resources. So I'm bringing all of who I am and all that I have to this celebration about God. It's focused on acknowledging the reality and the goodness and the grace of God. It is about an acknowledgement and celebration of God's grace.
That's right. And it's doing it with a lot of people. And so you're actually, if you're poor, you still go, and others who have more resources are to bring more resources to make sure everybody,
share with you.
make sure everybody.
Right.
There's nobody allowed. The sojourner, the male servant, the female servant, everybody has to stop, go, feast, be provided for if you need to be provided for. Because to belong to this God is actually a communal reality. You belong to a body, to a people, and you have a place there, and you get to enjoy it.
Right.
That's the fundamental reality of a feast, is the enjoyment aspect.
And it's that idea of everybody's included. You know, some of our thinking is like a big banquet where you have to buy a ticket and you have to pay to go. And so there are certain people who can afford it, so they get to go and celebrate. And then there are others who they're not necessarily excluded intentionally, but they're excluded circumstantially if they can't afford to go and pay for it. So part of the beauty of feasting is everyone is included, everybody is provided for, and it's kind of the image, you know, we get from the New Testament. Those who have more are expected to give more. Those who have less bring what they have. And I also like this idea that everybody brings.
Yes.
You know,
You
and
don't
so
come empty-handed.
Yeah, even if I don't have much, I'm able to contribute. And so sometimes we get this mindset of if you don't have enough or you don't have extra, then you don't really need to contribute. But there's something where we lose our sense of God and we lose our sense of self. It's the widow's mite. I don't have much, but I'm going to bring it and contribute to the feast.
That's right. And I don't bring it out of a shame place. Like, for me, I call it a piety of feasting, or a spirituality of feasting. It was so striking because I grew up, it's not anybody's fault but mine. I grew up with a narrative in my head, I'll call it a piety of shame, where actually my relationship to God wasn't centered around and structured around feasting. It was centered and structured around my feeling ashamed of myself and my having disappointed God, my having been in the wrong, my having to confess it. And then there's an energy to that because now I have something to confess, and then I can feel close to God because I've kind of purged this. And you can see where it fits in an addiction cycle. And this is a very different approach. Shame isn't anywhere in view when you come to Jerusalem for these feasts.
Yeah. What's interesting is kind of using the image of shame and comparing it to the feast. In kind of a banquet of shame, you have this belief that I have to earn my way there. I have to be good enough. I have to bring enough. And what's also true is because I'm so bad, God really doesn't want me there. But the price of admission is some sort of confession or some sort of thing that I'm able to bring that maybe I will be good enough. But it becomes this currency of exchange rather this abundance of grace.
Right. You walk in, you're invited to this feast 3 times, not just invited. It's a strong invite, as in you must do this. You're brought in, and your life could look whatever it looks. You are to come and rejoice before the Lord your God. There is always grace sufficient, always grace sufficient, always grace. And those 3 times a year are especially the moments where you get to come and enjoy that God loves his people. And it's really, really a good thing to belong to this God.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because in the New Testament, there are so many parables that are based upon this understanding of the banquet table and the feasting. And what may be true is we even have difficulty understanding what was being said in the New Testament because we don't fully understand this concept in the Old Testament. One of the things that you talked about is, and there would be abundance. There'd be abundance of food. There'd be abundance of drinking. Was this one time or these 3 times a year where overindulgence was encouraged and welcomed? Or were there some parameters that even in the abundance, we seek to be good stewards and we don't overindulge?
Yeah, so I don't like the language of overindulging. I think it's indulging. Like good feasting is indulging. Now that's not gluttony. Gluttony is about turning that food, turning the drink to serve me. Right. It's turning it so that I'm not actually anymore enjoying the food. I'm enjoying what the food does for me, to me, with me. And feasting is a very different prospect. And so it's almost impossible to overindulge that it's good to belong to this God in this way, in this body. Now, there's laws about drunkenness and all of these things. But again, there's things that they thought of differently than we do. They drink a lot more wine.
What if overindulgence is engaging beyond my limits and capacity?
Yeah.
So I eat past being full. I drink beyond being stable. I'm no longer focusing on God. I've made it about me and my desires.
Well, and it's not just God that I can't focus on. I can't focus on the community. Now I can't focus on the feasting. So I've actually eaten and drunk myself past the ability to feast anymore. Right. So you've stopped feasting and turned it to gluttony. And that's one of the deadly sins, gluttony. And so, it's that dynamic. So there's the limits, but it's... For me, it's not about, okay, so how much to eat, how much to... It's if you do it in a way that turns against being able to feast, that's a problem. You've eaten yourself out of the feast. You've drunk yourself out of feasting. And now you've missed the boat. You've mistaken it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's also about... You cannot celebrate too much.
Yeah, that's right.
You cannot over-celebrate. You cannot over-participate in the community. You can't over-connect. And so that really is part of the invitation. If we just limit feasting to food and drink, as that's the only thing you're invited to, again, we're missing out on the greater significance of coming together in an intentional way to acknowledge the goodness, the grace, the beauty of God.
That's right. That's right. And the community piece is really, really important because you can't just, I'm going to have a feast by myself. You can have a really good meal by yourself. But a feast is by its nature a communal work. It's done in community. That's why I love it as this image, obviously in the scriptures, for the fullness of what God gives to his people. On this mountain, I will throw an enormous feast in Isaiah, right? The last time is this enormous feast with well-aged wine and the abundance of food. Like that's the picture of what we're moving towards. But it's this community. You're brought in and you get to do this you have a place where you belong. And not belong because you're amazing. Like that's not why you're there.
I think it's like the feasting is a microcosm of the year of Jubilee. That it's a reminder that there's this balance that is coming, that there's an equality for everyone, that we aren't defined by our resources, and we are defined by our kindness and our generosity and our inclusion of everyone that wants and is able to participate.
Yeah, and so some of my think on this, there's an article a number of years ago somebody wrote where he talked about feasting as a cure for gluttony. The virtue of feasting as a cure for gluttony, which, what a great title. My hat's off to the guy. Just a great way of thinking. And addiction is gluttony.
That's exactly what I was thinking too.
Addiction is gluttony. And this, I have to steal the joy that I want in life. I feel bad. So a piety of shame, I feel terrible about myself, or I think I'm supposed to, or I just do anyway. And I don't love living that way. And we want to steal and hide it. And that's where gluttony lives. And feasting is actually that opposite image. It shifts things. It turns it on its head and says, actually, you're coming in the open with others to a feast, hiding nothing,
Right.
and rejoicing there. John Chrysostom said, where love rejoices, there is feasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it too is, like you said, it's all out in the open. There is no exclusion. There is no secrets. You bring what you have, you put it on the communal table. And, gluttony is this seeking that this thing is going to rescue me from something in my life that isn't working, or to, take me away from something I'm running from. Whereas the feasting isn't about being absent, it's about being present in the experience and being transformed by that experience.
That's right. It's God has provided. So the three great feasts were Passover, then the Feast of Weeks, what we call Pentecost, because it's 7 weeks after Passover, and the Feast of Tents, booths sometimes. But all three of them are tied to God provides for his people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you walk in. It's this beautiful image. God has provided, and your job is to enjoy it.
Right. Well, and what if we even say God provides for his people through the people?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that's part of this dynamic of the invitation of feasting is, again, whatever resources I have, whatever capacity I have, I bring that to this experience, and we're all doing that together.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's not just the rich leader in the community providing for everybody else, or pay-as-you-go banquet, but it really is everybody is providing for others. And it's the acknowledgement of, I like to talk about the redemptive partnership, where we are transformed when we enter into this partnership with God and we hear the invitation of Jesus. Well, the feasting is the redemptive partnership, that invitation to bring all of who we are to this celebration and transformation.
Yeah. And a part of, again, because of my story, and just, I hated my body.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of reasons for that and dynamics to it. And this idea of walking into community where I don't have to feel ashamed, and others are providing for me, and I'm sharing with them, and we're all sitting. And the whole point of it is to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. The whole point is just enjoy what God has given, including one another.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get to be, so that's, for me, it's this beautiful image of recovery.
Right.
Like one of the things, what are we recovering? Well, feasting is one of them, which is, again, we want to talk about the life of recovery is far more fun than the life of being captive to our addictions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, feasting is a pretty good indication of it's supposed to be fun. It is fun. It's good. And it's a thing to be pursued in community.
Well, and what's true is in church history, there came a time when we began to fear enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
We began to fear desires. They were a threat to piety and our relationship with God. And ironically, when we entered into that space, we transformed the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
We transformed who God was. We transformed what it meant to be in relationship with God. And I think part of what the feasting imagery does is it takes us back to that place of joy and enjoyment and connection in a way that is a celebration. And what's fascinating is, and tragic, is most celebration is seen outside of the church. And if the church can reclaim celebration as a spiritual practice and discipline, and not based on shame, not based upon fear, when those of us who love God bring fully our resources, and we have the eternal potluck, and we allow whatever. I grew up Baptist, and I love potlucks. And the thing I love about potlucks, back in the day, people would bring their best dish. And, this particular person brought her pie, and this particular person brought his ribs, and everybody was bringing their best. And it was just a time of connection and celebration and enjoyment. And I love that imagery of, there is this alternative to feasting, which is gluttony. And it is our responsibility to steward ourselves and be that wise adult so we feast, we don't engage in the gluttony. But for us, that line is thin and we can easily move between the two, but the invitation is towards feasting.
That's right. That's right. And again, if we're doing it in community and we're doing it openly and we're doing it honestly, I don't think we have to be as afraid on the gluttony side.
Right. I agree.
That's what I do when I'm in the dark, when I'm by myself, when I'm stealing something, when I'm making it serve me instead of in feasting. The food is good. Like your eyes get to be on all kinds of things that are not me. Gluttony, my eyes are always on me. And so that way of posturing it. Also just, so I grew up, you talk about Baptists, I thought you were going a different direction, because I grew up and I had family members who were very influenced by the teetotaler movement and kind of the lingering dynamics of that, which is still around some, but not as, doesn't have as much a hold. And the miracle of Jesus at Cana and the basic response. So one person actually, dear wonderful Christian woman, said, "Yeah, that's one part when Jesus turned the water to wine. Yeah, that's one thing I just wish he didn't do." And it was so, like, even as a kid, I was like, that doesn't seem quite right.
We're wishing Jesus didn't do certain things.
Yeah, Jesus got criticized.
Well, and probably a better way to say it is, I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
Yeah,
That's maybe what
we'll
was
give her the
intended.
benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. But it's this, I mean, it is a striking, he made, so, the middle estimate is 150 gallons of wine after they'd been drinking a few days. Like, they'd already run out of wine, which meant, that they didn't just get 2 bottles for the party. And so that amounts to something like 750 bottles of wine, of good wine. But again, it's part of actually this really old, what does it mean when God comes to dwell with his people? Feasting. Like, it means feasting and enjoying this celebration and superabundance of the provision of God. Like, we have to root that miracle. Actually, that's directly tied into Isaiah and what Isaiah is talking about, to the law in Deuteronomy and how Deuteronomy structures the life of the people. And it's just, of what else would we expect when God comes to be with his people? Well, I grew up expecting God to have a frown. Like, when God comes to visit his people, he'll look cockeyed. And I'm a student of the prophets, so I'm not ignorant of God's rebuke.
Right.
But that's what we see, his very first sign in John's gospel. When God comes to be with his people, feast.
Right. Well, and what's also true is we hear the invitation to feast, but we hear it through the lens of fear and shame versus joy and surrender to what is. And part of the work that we have to do, especially in recovery, is to identify those places of fear and shame. So, somebody mentions wine, it's about fear and shame. If somebody mentions food, it's about fear and shame. Versus this invitation of being, just to be with community, to be and enjoy the food in an embodied way. Part of feasting is dependent upon me being present with myself physically and tasting what I am eating and touching and letting myself see the beauty of the food and really engaging holistically in embodied experience at the feast. And again, it's reclaiming that in recovery where I'm living fully as the person that God created me to be, embodied in a way that understands the goodness of God's creation.
Yeah, and sometimes I think about the journey to the feasts, and part of me, it's, I love thinking about little kids and how they get shaped by that every year. Like, this is our one vacation for this part of the year, and then another one, and every year, like, it would be overwhelming to be a little kid in a city like that with everybody eating, but all of your cousins are there, and all of your cousins' cousins and their cousins' cousins, and this huge community, and you get to spend your entire life being shaped around that. That's actually what it means to belong to God. Which is such a beautiful image that I think we can do better at as a church, re-embracing what that could mean.
What that means is we belong and we are a part of. We are a part of something bigger than us. We are a part of just beyond our family, beyond our community. And I think that's part of the power of the gathering, is that you see the bigness of God in the strength of the community and the diversity of the community and the responsibility of the community. And we often talk about salvation as being an individualistic thing, but there's so many images in the scripture where it is about the community came to faith, the belief of one with the belief for all. And there is this sense of God's invitation to us as individuals, and yet it is also an invitation to the community to come and be a part.
Yeah. And one of the things I love, it's missed a lot because we're not always very sure how to read a book like Deuteronomy. But you're laughing here, yeah. But
So
even
true.
right, so Deuteronomy's theology of itself, right? Like there's lots of aspects to that, but there's one time a year where God's instruction to his people is to be read. So feasting isn't opposed to, oh, well, then go do whatever you want the rest of the year. But the one time a year it's to be read publicly is actually explicitly stated as it's on the highest day of the highest feast, the feast that was called the feast par excellence, the rejoicing of rejoicing feast. So on the day where people are rejoicing the most, in the feast where they're rejoicing the most, in the whole year, that's where God then says, no, don't go there, that way's death. Right? That's the context in which, okay, now I get to hear. So I don't even hear the 10 Commandments aren't read aloud to the people as a shaming thing. It's okay, you're rejoicing, you're with me, you belong, you're here, I have provided. Don't steal.
Right. Yeah. There are parameters, there are boundaries, and those boundaries don't limit relationship, don't limit possibility. They actually create more possibility, and they also enhance relationships. So again, we see these limitations as boundaries that keep us from living the lives we want to live versus actually the guidelines that allow us to live more fully the life that we are invited to.
Right. So even the life of walking in sobriety gets to be one that's lived as a feasting life. That's where I'm called to sobriety, to live a sober and godly life.
Right.
Absolutely. The best place to say that is at a feast.
It's interesting. I do think of the families, if anybody has kids, if they've ever had to pack up to go on vacation, there is a lot of effort to do it. And if you're taking everything you need and all the food that you need, there was effort to getting there. It wasn't like this easy thing, but the invitation and the experience made all of the effort worthwhile. And what's true is recovery is work. Feasting is work. And yet the outcome, what we experience, the community, the connection, the transformation, the space of grace, not shame, it does take effort to get there. You got to load the minivan. And yet it is so worthwhile to be in that space.
Yeah, and I do think it's hard because a lot of us, we've lost an appetite for feasting because we have so many pale shadows of it, where no culture in the world has had more access to food and so much abundance of food, so much so that we don't feast anymore. And that strange dynamic, and reacquiring a taste for feasting like this, even for the one who in and of their own works don't deserve a feast, that they're invited and they get to come and they depend on others and others depend on that, and that interconnection, and it gets to be an image of the way of the Christian life, is that kind of dynamic that's framed. It's nowhere clearer, nowhere more wonderful and more fully embodied than we're sitting together as a community and really giving ourselves to the work of feasting together.
Well, and what's true is we fear feasting. we fear grace. We would rather be able to pay as we go, because then we get to be in charge. We get to be responsible. We get to have this illusion of control. But the imagery of feasting is surrendering. It is acknowledging that this isn't because of us. It's not, I haven't earned my right to be at the feast. I haven't done good deeds. I don't get a better seat because I'm bringing more stuff. It really is a space of grace, and grace is scary, because what that means is it's about God and it's not about us. And so we come to the feast surrendering to what is, allowing the truth of God to be what the invitation is about.
Well, Josh, we want to thank you for joining us today. Great conversation about the principles of feasting, and we hope that our listeners and viewers have enjoyed today's show. We hope that you'll visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com. And Greg, thanks to you as always, of course. And thanks to Kayla, our engineer and producer. She's done another wonderful job today. But please visit faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find all the information and online registration for our 3-day intensive workshops, the Men's Journey Workshop, the Women's Journey Workshop, and our 2 varieties of Couples Journey Workshops. In the meantime, we hope that this coming week will be a week for you that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.